Hi, Maria.
Hi.
So I'm ecstatic to introduce Maria at today's event. We started out as colleagues at a startup and soon jokingly referred to each other as the workwife. We bonded over the values we were raised with, the challenges we faced being women in tech, and our love of food. I will let her talk spotlight and all her technical accomplishments, but I'd like to share my perspective of what makes Maria a leader in this community. As you might have guessed, she's determined, not just to achieve her personal goals, but she's determined to make whatever hand of cards she's dealt be a success. She's brave for the way she takes changes in stride and brings others along with her through her exceptional wit, intelligence, and characteristic sarcasm. I admire her for the way in which she advocates for what is right, ensuring her opinion is heard while also educating those around her. She isn't intimidated by her surroundings, or at least she doesn't show it. Maria is not just a recognized tech leader. She's a mother, a wife, a pastry chef, a distiller, a farmer, an art collector, a music fan, and my good friend. Please welcome Maria.
Thank you. The tears here are definitely something that I feel very deeply. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria. I'll be talking about my personal experience in being a woman in the technical software engineering world tonight. Thank you so much for having me to DevTO. I'm really excited to be here. I will start by acknowledging my privilege here first. I know that everyone's experiences are very different in this field, and mine as a white, middle-aged, able-bodied, and cisgender woman allow me to move through the world in a very, very privileged way. So I really want to acknowledge that before I get going. So 20 years of org charts in my career. This is going to go very brief. I'm on job number 5 right now. So my first job was about 20 years ago. The org chart looked like this. A lot of men. I worked at Microsoft. Bill G was obviously at the top. There was one woman right here who hired me into the position that I was in. And then jobs 2 and 4 looked kind of like this. Not a single woman in my chain of command. And then job 3 and 5 looked like this. So very early on in my career, I understood that we had a problem in the technical world, and I understood what the problem was. I obviously did not know how to solve it. I still don't. But for me, it has remained one of the more important things is every time when I get in a room, when I'm having technical conversations or when I'm interviewing or when I'm speaking at conferences like this one, I always count the women. And I thought that as my career progressed and as I got a little bit higher up the chain, maybe that would stop. It hasn't, and for me, this has become one of the kind of most quintessential experiences of my life is just realizing how difficult it is and how rare it is to be a woman in the technical world and to be the only woman in the room. So what's my story? Here is a brief summary of who I am. I'm a 3rd-generation engineer, including my mom, who is spent her career in mechanical engineering. And yet, of all the engineers in my family, I'm the least engineer of them all. My brother makes sure that planes stay up in the sky while they're flying, and my parents spent their careers ensuring the safety of really large industrial equipment. So me doing software is definitely one of the softest engineering disciplines in my family. I went to university to do theater, and instead I walked away with a double major in computer science and math. Life can be confusing sometimes, and so that's how that worked out for me. I was going to go to grad school, but then didn't. I was really fortunate to spend a number of my summers when I was in undergrad doing research, and then I think I did a little bit too much research and then decided that grad school was not for me. I initially paused my plans to go to grad school. And then I spent a number of years at Microsoft, and then grad school seemed like a distant thought. So I have not gone back. I recruited Microsoft into hiring me as my first job out of school. It continues to be the only job that I get regularly asked about when I go and speak to people or when I interview. I say that I recruited Microsoft because I was hired in the spring of 2002, right after kind of the tech bubble burst. And so when I started my recruiting with Microsoft, it was the fall prior. The entire cycle took about 8 months. I had absolutely terrible interviews all throughout, and somehow I still managed to get a job, which continues to baffle me to this day. Besides Microsoft, I have worked at 2 startups, 2 small companies, which I consider less than 200 people, and I have been through 5 acquisitions and 1 merger, which is, for those of you who are in the technical world, you kind of know that this is the name of the game. I graduated from an emerging leaders corporate program a couple of years ago. I was the only one at the time who did this while pregnant. It continues to be one of the most defining moments of my life when I was able to do that while being pregnant and then with a young child. I have an unfinished degree in baking and pastry arts. It feeds my soul while feeding others. I really love baking for others. And I have 2 children who are 7 and 11. Those are not their names, it's their ages. So in terms of what my day looks like as VP of engineering, I thought I'll give people an opportunity to see what I do on a daily basis. So we can't have a presentation without a pie chart. So here's mine. So I spend about 40% of my time on an average day, of which I have none. But if I were to combine all of my time and really think about what I spend my time doing, about 40% of my time is spent on people things. And so I call this anything that goes along with mentoring. I spend a lot of time just talking to people about how they feel, which is what I refer to as therapy. I do lots of hiring and firing decisions, and then generally anything that pertains to managing people. That takes about 40% of my time. 30% of my time I spent on doing risk management. So how bad is it if we broke a feature and other people found out, and trying to assess the risk both technically and to our business if that happened. I spend about 20% of my time doing absolutely random stuff like budgeting, organizational planning. I talk to clients, I talk to other departments, I try to establish relationships with contracting companies and work with vendors. So these are just like a random bag of things that I do every day. And then the last 10% of my time is spent on technical direction. So this is going to become obvious later on when we're going to talk about this. I spend very little of my time as a VP of engineering actually doing technical stuff. It doesn't mean that you don't need to have a basis in a technical field in order to be in my position, but you will spend very little time actually doing technical stuff in a position like mine. The TLDR of what my days are, I spent an enormous amount of time in meetings, so many meetings. As an introvert, this is incredibly hard because I am exhausted at the end of every day, and it consumes all of the energy that I have. It can also be quite lonely, and I'll speak about that a little bit later, but this is definitely a position in which you realize the extent of your friendships and the extent of the relationships that you're going to make in a position in work. So some of the things that I have learned over the years of being in the technical field, I'm going to go through a couple of the lessons that I have. It's much easier to get somewhere if you know where you're going. Very early on, as I mentioned in my career, I knew that I was going to be shooting for one of the kind of higher levels of executive positions. So I knew that I was going to be going either for a CTO position or a VP of engineering or kind of a GM of a larger technical organization. And because of that, I, along the way in my career, was able to take a number of steps which enabled me to get to the position that I wanted. I'm very fortunate to be where I am. I consider myself like fairly young to be in the position that I am. And it really helped that from the very beginning, I understood what my goal was. And so that really helps if you're kind of thinking about what your career path might be. Know not just what your next step is, know not just going to be what the next 2 to 3 or 5 years look like, know where you're going long term. It really helps to get there. You don't have to be the best at anything. As you saw from my how I spend my day, you don't have to be the best developer, you don't have to be the best tester, you don't have to be the best at anything. Instead, you have to be reasonably good at a few things, and you need to be able to do those things continuously, time and time again, and be reasonably good at them over a long period of time. With this comes, of course, the need to learn continuously and to be open to continuously learn and be able to grow in what those things are. But perfection or being the best at anything is not what's going to get you in a position of leadership. It's just going to occupy too much of your time to be trying to get to be the best developer. And so you're not going to have enough time to do other things. there are positions where being the best at something is what you want. So if you want to be a software architect, being the best developer that you can be is likely a really good thing that you can focus on. But that's a different track than the one that I went on. I very early understood that I wanted to be in a position where I was involved with a number of different decision-making processes that didn't just involve technical capability. If taking risk doesn't come naturally to you, like it doesn't to me, I'm very risk adverse in my nature, you will need to practice the skill, because as you get higher up the chain, a lot of what you're going to do is going to be taking measured risks. That points back to that risk management portion of how I spend my day. So if you find yourself that you know about yourself that risk taking isn't something that comes naturally to you, make sure that you find ways in which you can practice this. There's a million ways that you can do this. Go play some poker with a limited amount of money, invest in the stock market. Again, like just try to make sure that you practice those risk-taking abilities and that risk management and risk assessment, because that's going to be a really important part of what you do as you climb up the ladder. You can get a job answering an ad online. In fact, I have every time when I have gotten hired in any of those 5 jobs. And when you do, run that process like a Toronto real estate deal right now. So last time when I was on the job market was about 6 years ago. I had left an organization after a merger and an acquisition. And at that time, I went out to a number of organizations. I applied for a number of available jobs, and I basically told everyone that I'm looking to make a decision by this date, and that if they could accommodate me going through the interview loop and then getting me a hiring decision by that date, that was great. But if it wasn't, then I wasn't going to be a candidate that they could consider. So instead of being on one of these loops that's going to be like, you're going to have an interview today, an interview again 2 weeks from now, and then 4 to 6 weeks later, we're going to tell you what the result is, I wasn't going to be able to be in that position. So instead, what I did is I told all of the recruiters up front what my parameters were for when I was looking to make a final decision by. And at the end, I ended up getting 4 offers and was able to choose an offer that really was the best for me. So make sure that you really kind of consider your options. We are very much in a candidate market right now. This is definitely something that you can do. And I'm terrible at networking, and so I have always just gotten jobs by answering LinkedIn ads or ads online. So that's definitely possible. Just make sure that you do it kind of in a very focused way. For those of you who are in tech roles who are looking to kind of start climbing up the ladder, if a position like a VP of engineering is in something that you're interested in doing, eventually you will stop coding. And that eventually is a lot sooner than you think. And so kind of think about that when you're making your decision, when you're setting your career goals, because it can end up being really difficult if you put yourself down a path of kind of like going down the path of being an executive, when you realize halfway there that you're just like not spending enough time coding, and that's actually really important for you. So really understand that your ability to continue coding as you're climbing up the ladder is going to diminish significantly, and that's going to be pretty quick. One of the most important things that I do on a day-to-day basis is I make sure that I'm upholding a very high technical bar in the field. And so for me, one of the most important and yet difficult decisions that I have to do every time when I hire somebody is when they're coming in, they're like, well, they're looking for example, for a senior developer title. And for me, like after assessing their technical abilities, I can saying something like, well, actually for our organization, this is closer to an intermediate developer is really difficult. You run the chance of losing a candidate, and in a candidate market right now, this is really difficult. But at the end of the day, I look at software development as a career, right? Like it's something that people do for many years. Some of us are going to have like tens of years in the software world. expecting that you're going to become a senior software developer in your year 5 of developing is just really difficult because you likely have not had enough experience to gather all that knowledge. So this is one of the most difficult things that I do is every day to just like think about what the technical bar is for the organization that I lead and to try to uphold the high technical bar across our field in general. It has caused me lots of tears over the years, and this is probably one of the hardest things to do. And a couple of years ago, I was really feeling quite burned out, and I had a really difficult time trying to think about what my purpose was and why I was doing the things that I was doing. My years at Microsoft and then the number of years that I had spent at startups were difficult, and I put an enormous amount of work. And over time, I really felt like I couldn't figure out really why I was doing the things that I was doing and what really made me stay in the field. And I had considered leaving a number of times. But at the end, this is what makes me stay. My utmost responsibility to the field is to uplift and promote women, BIPOC, and other marginalized people in the software world. So for me, this is what I do every day. I work for a business. I make sure that our business is successful. I make sure that we provide the best software development environment that we can and the best software development product that we can. But at the end of the day, what I really think about every day, day in and day out, is how do I do this? How do I promote and uplift people in our field who don't generally have a voice and who generally have not been promoted nearly as much? And it's the reason why I'm here. Over the years, I have had a few regrets. And so I'll mention a few of them. Maybe some of you will see lessons that you have learned as well, or regrets that you've had. Humans first, or people first, took me a while. I will blame this on my first employer. Microsoft was a really brutal organization at the time when I worked there, super competitive. It required you to want to be there 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so it was really difficult for me as time went on and I went and I worked in other organizations to really realize when people talked about having this people first approach, what did that really mean? What it really means is it doesn't mean people first in the context of a project or in the context of a business. It means when somebody comes to your office and tells you that they can't be here today for whatever reason, because they're having a personal issue or they need to go and deal with something, that you just let them go and really place people's well-being and mental health above anything else. Because at the end of the day, it's those people that are going to carry your projects and your business forward over the years. It's that kind of really personal relationship that you're going to build, with them over time. So this took me a while to figure out. This is, again, like something that I work on daily. I have to remind myself that this is our purpose is to create connections with other people and to really allow other people to thrive off of those connections. And so this is one of the things that I regret. It took me a while. So many tears. I'm super highly emotional as a person. I have cried in so many high-level technical meetings. I have cried in front of so many of my direct managers, skip levels, CEOs, you name it, I've cried in front of them. I felt deeply embarrassed by this for many, many years. And it was really difficult for me to try to overcome that embarrassment that I had internally for doing this. I felt like it was unprofessional, that it really painted me in a very weak light. I continue to cry in many meetings. In fact, I did last week. It is part of who I am. It's how I express myself. I know that at times it can make people feel uncomfortable, but I have no more regrets about being this. But it took me a really long time to arrive here and to really feel comfortable with who I am, and the fact that my tears are just my tears. And the fact that last regret that I have here, and kind of the form of a lesson, sucking at negotiations is a side effect of imposter syndrome. So it took me a number of years to really get to a place where I was comfortable negotiating for myself and really advocating for myself, whether it be in job interviews or about promotions or something like that. It takes a really long time, and this is not a skill that comes naturally to a lot of women. We are socially conditioned out of it. You are told to be nice, and you are taught that for the majority of your upbringing years. So being able to negotiate for yourself and to really prove your worth over time is definitely a skill. Again, kind of like risk taking. If this doesn't come naturally to you, which it doesn't to the majority of us, you need to practice it. And whether that be like, you're going to negotiate with your landlord. Well, the stakes may be really low about, what your rent's going to be next year for your lease, or something like that. Do this, get yourself to a place where you really understand what it takes for you to negotiate successfully with people, because you're going to need to do that. And not just as a way of negotiating your own well-being, but also as you go through and rise through the ranks, negotiations are going to be a lot of what you spend your time doing, especially when it comes to working with other parts of your organization. So, or even with other peers, frankly. I have a personal horror story, and this is from, a couple years ago when I was talking to the CEO of a company that I worked for, who I was having a skip level with him, and we were talking about career development and what I was really after. And and I had spent a number of meetings with him prior, trying to really plant the seed around what my next career move was going to be and what I was looking for. And in order to do that, I was using a title to say what my next career step I want to be. And he kept pushing back against me for this. And every time he'd be like, why do you want that title so badly? Like, why are you so focused on the title? And at the time, of course, I gave them the very practiced answer that you read about, which is I'm really looking about expanded responsibility. I'm looking to be able to take more on and be more directly responsible for parts of the business. I really equated what that title. I was trying to explain to him what I was really after. It took me a number of years to realize why that bothered me so much, why his pushing back and kind of his questioning of why I was after that title really stuck with me in ways that I hadn't quite internalized. And it was because him as a white male could sit there in any room that he walked in and claim, the attention and be granted the advantage and responsibilities just by being who he was. And as a woman in the field that I was in, I needed that title in order to signify the role that I had gotten to a place to occupy. Because as you can see from this picture, the technical world is still predominantly male. And if you walk in and you carry a title, that is your first step in the door where people really kind of start to pay attention to you. And like I said, it took me a really long time to kind of come up to the realization that this was really what was behind why I felt so hurt because he was pushing back on it so hard. And now being on the other side, when I do have this title, I can tell you it absolutely makes a difference. Walking into a room carrying a title, being who you are, and being able to say that title really does make a difference. On this note, it took me a while to really be able to say the title that I had, because for a while after I got the title that I wanted, for a while after I became a VP of engineering, I had a really tough time actually saying those words out loud, because in some really deep way, I must have felt like I didn't really deserve it. And I had worked so hard, but maybe, I only got it because I had been this really super stubborn and thorny person to have in an organization. So the last year or so has been, a big learning moment and big journey for me, being able to go to places, even virtually, but say these words out loud and being really able to be this person that I had been after, this title that I had been after for a long time. And last but not least, leaving a bit on a note, kind of similar to what Janice was talking about, progress in our field is slow and it's nonlinear. So I have seen a change over my career over the last 20 years. I have definitely seen more women become part of the technical world and become part of the software development world. but this change is linear, it is very slow, and it is not linear. So a lot of times we will make 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's really difficult to see, especially when you're like, wow, in 20 years, we have made only this much progress. What I try to do and what I do every day is I really try to focus on the tiny changes that I can make. And now being in the position that I'm in, I can lead an organization where we really focus on diversity and inclusion, and where a lot of the time that I do spend, a lot of the work that I do is around how do we expand the applicant pool, and how do I talk to enough candidates out there who can see that like having a woman in this position is kind of an interesting thing, and that we are an organization that really promotes that, and it isn't just words. So I always recommend people, it's really difficult to think about really large problems and how to solve them. Those are not, those are difficult and futile attempts. What I try to do is I really try to focus on the things that are in front of me, and the things that I can have access and can instill change over. And so those are the tiny little changes that I try to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I feel like I just want to say it again. Thank you, our VP of Engineering. I really appreciate the story you shared about running a job search process like a real estate deal. I think there's a lot of power in that. And what really resonated to me is that you put yourself first in a traditionally very opaque process that takes the power away from us as individuals and can really make us feel very vulnerable to the whims of others. And I have to say, I had never even thought about sharing a date when you're looking for a new job. So thank you for that.